Hey everybody, Pastor Stephen Anderson here from Faithful Word Baptist Church in Tempe, Arizona. I'm sitting down here with Pastor David Berzins of Stronghold Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia. And we're going to talk a little bit about his early life, his upbringing, his personal interests. Now, Pastor Berzins, you were actually raised Presbyterian, right?
That's right.
You want to tell us a little bit about what that was like?
Basically, we would go to church every week in his Presbyterian church. We drove a little bit to get there. I don't know all the reasons why my parents chose the church where we went to, but I went faithfully pretty much every week. You know, my childhood was, I call it a normal upbringing. My parents were both married. They raised me with, I would call, conservative rules.
It's around Chicago.
And this is in the Chicago area, yeah, in Burbank, Illinois, is where I was born and raised. And we would go to church every week. And in the Presbyterian church, what they would do is the children would be in for the very first part of service with their families. And I don't remember the whole order, if there was like a song, and then they'd kind of call the kids up, and the pastor would give a little like 1 or 2 minute spiel, and then the kids would be sent off to their classrooms where they would remain for the remainder of the church service.
So he directed that lesson toward the kids? Is that
right.
what, he would just kind of address them for a minute or two and then send
exactly.
them out?
Yeah, we'd all sit down up front. He'd be talking, and then the kids would all be dismissed to the classroom, and then the rest of church would continue for the adults. And down in the kids area, it was, I don't have a lot of memories of everything that took place, but we would sing the kid type songs
Somewhere
about
in
Jesus,
outer space.
those types of things, and they'd give a lesson. But you have snacks and just other stuff. It was really, I don't know if I call it a daycare, but it's kind of what it was. There was some teaching and some activities and things like that, but nothing very memorable as far as that experience goes. And then when the way that the Presbyterian church was structured, at least the one I went to, in junior high, if your family goes to church there, you end up attending confirmation classes. And confirmation means to be confirmed into the church. It's where this period of time where you're supposed to, and for adults that weren't part of the church, they would also have classes, right? If you wanted to join the church, you'd go, you'd study, they'd teach you whatever they want you to know before you'd be formally designated as a member or voted
instead
in.
of just you're being brought by your parents, now like you're a church member.
Right.
Yourself.
Right.
And you were how old?
And that's 7th, 8th grade, 12, 13 years old. It's 2 years. We go every Wednesday night. I think it was, I don't remember how many months it was, but kind of during the course of the school year, on Wednesday evening, I'd go, and they give us all this Reformed material. So we learn about John Calvin, Protestant church history. And, I was, as far as my faith goes, I wasn't into church. It wasn't my thing. If you were to ask me when I was 12, 13 years old, if I believed in God, I'd say yeah, because I did. I believed in God. If you'd say, are you a Christian? I would say yes. I'd identify with being a Presbyterian, just as when we go out soul winning, you ask someone, they say, oh, I'm a Catholic or I'm a Lutheran or whatever. I identify with whatever I was being raised as. But that wasn't my personal faith. I didn't have my own set beliefs. I hadn't really thought about it a lot. I was a de facto Christian just because I went to church. It was never really my faith. But during the course of this confirmation classes, what's kind of interesting about that is that for 2 years, I'm studying, I'm learning, and I've always been a good student, right? I was never very disruptive or a troublemaker. When I would go to school, I went to public school, and I did what I needed to do. I would do my homework, I would take tests, and as far as being a student goes, I was a good student. I was able to perform. So it transferred over with the confirmation class. We'd get homework. I'd have to bring my lessons home and do those and get those done. So I did all that work for the 2 years. But at the end of the 2 years is when you have this session. So before you get confirmed into the church, the pastor had a meeting individually with every single person that was going through the confirmation classes. And the point of that meeting was to kind of see where you're at, what you believe, before actually going through the confirmation process. I would say similar to if you were to baptize someone, you'd probably ask them to make sure you know for sure that they're saved before you're going to actually perform the baptism. So before getting confirmed into the church, the pastor would have a meeting with you. Now, what's kind of funny about that, though, is that these are all kids of adults that are in the church already. So imagine what it would be like for the pastor to say, this child is not being confirmed in the church that the parents are already a member of. So, think about...
Did that ever happen?
Never since I've been there. I've never seen it happen once. So every
it's like
single
no child
person who...
left behind.
Exactly. That was the mentality there. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of funny because then it's like, well, why even have the sit-down meeting with the pastor if they're all going to get in anyways?
Right.
But what happened with my meeting, personally, I said I wasn't some horrible troublemaker as a kid, but I did get into trouble. I was a worldly kid. I was doing worldly things, and at that time in junior high, there was a lot of people were talking about stealing, right? And that was kind of a thing. And I had a friend that would go and they'd steal and they do that. So you hear these things, and with a childish mind, it sounds intriguing or fascinating, or I want to be like one of the cool kids, and they're all stealing. So the day I decided, we went into a supermarket or a grocery store, and my friend, he's already stolen before, so he's loading up his pockets. We had jean jackets, and they had the big inner pockets, and he was throwing stuff in, and I decided that was the day that I wanted to try to take something.
The day that you're getting confirmed.
The day I'm getting confirmed. I was hanging out with my buddy. We go to the store, and I'm looking around, and I'm just like, and at this point, it's just taking something to take something.
Yeah, you didn't really want it.
I didn't even want it. Yeah, I remember what it was. It was a little roll of hard candy, like Jolly Ranchers. I remember what it was, and I grabbed it, put it in my pocket, and then we're both going out the checkout. We bought something to not look obvious, right? We bought some juice or something, and as we're walking out, they had on staff, their security or whoever, their loss prevention followed us out because you're not stealing until you actually take it out of the store. And then brought us back in, called our parents, and it was this big deal. And it's funny because I took that one little thing. Like I said, the point was to steal, not to have it.
Right.
And I'd never taken anything since or after that. That was kind of, I'm actually really thankful that I got caught.
Otherwise, you could have started this life of crime.
Maybe I would have gone farther into it. I don't know. But it wasn't a good experience. And they almost didn't even find it. Because it was just one small thing. Like my buddy had all these things. He had like cigarettes and candy and like all this stuff. He loaded up, and I had this one little thing. But so anyways, I get caught. That my parents had to come and pick me up, and it was an emotional day. Your parents are disappointed in you, and but that was also the day I was scheduled to go in and speak to the pastor of the Presbyterian Church to get confirmed into the church. So. We still went and did that. I went through and kind of went in there. I did not bring up any of the events of that day, and just kind of kept that to myself. But then what's interesting on the other side with this confirmation is I remember specifically him asking me, and I'm sure he asked me other things, but what stands out to me, my recollection of that day is that he asked me what I needed to do to be saved and go to heaven. And I told him, well, you got to believe in Jesus. And he says, is that all you have to do? Now, as a good student, or as a student, I learned how to, kind of read other people and see, am I giving the right answer? Am I not giving the right answer? So I'm starting to think, oh, well, maybe I'm wrong. I gave the wrong answer. And I start saying, well, he's like, is that it? Well, you got to pray. You got to go to church. I start listing off all these works, right? Because I didn't know. I just was repeating what I had heard or what I'd been taught.
You just wanted to give him the answer he's looking for.
Exactly. That's all I was trying to do.
You didn't actually have a core belief about, hey, this is what it takes to get to heaven.
Nope.
You were just kind of like that kid who goes to Spanish class, does the homework, passes the quiz, passes the test, but at the end of the day, he can't speak Spanish, right?
Yep. That's it. And, I had some level of belief in God or belief in Jesus on a generic sense. I wasn't some Christ rejecter of, just denying all of it. But I definitely was not trusting Jesus with my soul.
Saved,
I wasn't saved at all. so when I give him these answers, and he says, "Is that it?" Oh no, you got to do this, you got to do that, and he says, "No, actually, you just have to believe in Jesus." And he talked with me a little bit more, and then he says, "Well, I'm going to pray for you." So he like puts his hand on my knee or something, or on my shoulder, I don't remember, and we bow our heads, and he says a prayer for me, like as if I'm calling on the name of the
Like
Lord.
he's doing it for
like
you.
he's doing it for me, he's doing the praying for me.
Right.
And then I'm confirmed. So then we go through the ceremony, kind of like a graduation process, and I'm in the church. So that was that's how I got confirmed into the Presbyterian Church. And then from that point
So
forward,
that's how they figured out that you were one of the chosen.
yeah, I was
Because
elected.
they're Calvinists.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Apparently, I was elect at that point. It was obvious I was elect at that point.
Well, yeah.
I don't know because.
Clear
And
from the story.
it's funny. No child of any parent attending that church
Ended
was
up not
not
being
being elect. Yeah. So we were all elect, but and
so
it,
what was so you continued in the Presbyterian Church through your teenage years,
right. So at that point, children's church is over.
Mm-hmm.
When you're in high school, when when you've gone through the confirmation, there is no more junior classes for you. So now you're a full-fledged church member, so you attend church.
Right.
And I still continued to go. Like I said, I wasn't a really rebellious child. So if my parents said we're going to church, then I just went to church. It's something we did. But within church, it tended to be very boring. And I would often just kind of doze off. I don't remember the content.
You would literally fall asleep.
I would literally fall asleep in church.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what was your relationship like with your parents at that time, like as a teenager?
Yeah, it was pretty good. Like I said earlier, my parents were conservative upbringing.
Mm-hmm.
They definitely loved me. I'm very thankful for for my parents and for the way that they raised me. Obviously, I'm doing things different with my children, but honestly, I don't even think my parents were saved when I was being raised. So they're operating the best that they could in the world that we live in. They cared about me. I had more rules than many of my friends had. I had the luxury. Most of my friends actually, at least as I got a little bit older in life, were coming from split homes. They're living with their mom or living with their dad, not having two parents at home. And they all had a tendency to have a lot more freedom.
So they seem like they could just do whatever they wanted.
Yeah.
So what were some of the types of things that your parents prohibited?
So the first thing that comes to mind is when I was in junior high, I believe it was maybe 8th grade. There was I was really into heavy metal. So when I was in 8th grade, it was like end of the 80s, early 90s, and I was really into the heavy metal and the Motley Crue and Poison and Metallica and like all these different the glam bands they would call them. And I really wanted to go to a Metallica concert because that was my new favorite band. I really wanted to go see him, but I was in 8th grade. I'm 12, 13 years old.
Right.
And I had friends that were going, and they were allowed to go to the concert. And I asked my parents, hey, I want to go to this concert with my friends, and they knew one of them. He lived on the street with me. So I was like, I'm going to go with this friend. And they said, no, we're not going to let you go to this concert by yourself, and especially, a Metallica concert.
That's got to be a rough environment at a Metallica concert.
Yeah, I mean,
I've never been there, but it's probably not that wholesome of a.
It's not
environment.
No, yeah, and especially as a kid, I mean, it's you're gonna have a lot older people,
Adults
there, right? Yeah, of course.
It's gonna be mainly adults.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You're not. It's not like a concert of like the Backstreet Boys or something full of a bunch of little girls.
Teeny boppers
that love this. It's more appealing to.
You don't know that from
crowd.
experience. You about the Backstreet Boys. You were gonna go to that, did you?
No.
It scared me. No, I'm just kidding. So you didn't get to go, or what happened?
Well, so what happened then is that I threw a big fit as a 12. It's kind of embarrassing, but I threw a fit and
How dare you not let me go to this satanic rock concert?
Right. I was offended. Right? I was seriously offended. I for like a week, I would lock myself in my room and just blare my radio and just kind of rebel in that way,
right.
and not want to have anything to do with them because I was upset and I was going to let them know that I was mad. And I guess what you call a compromise. And this was right around like in December. So what they decided to do, I guess when they saw that I really liked this so much, my dad bit the bullet and decided to take me to the concert.
So
So
he
that
went to
way
the
I could
concert
still
with
go.
you?
So he went with me, and I got a chance to go. And, it worked out for me in that sense.
And he's a big Metallica fan to this day. No, I'm just kidding.
It's not, that wasn't what he wanted to do. But
So what was
again,
his,
it shows
what was his response to this concert?
he was just kind of stood there. He was all right with
He
it.
just
It wasn't,
kind of went
yeah,
along with
he
it.
went with it. It
Just
wasn't,
kind of humored you, just
yeah,
whatever.
Yeah, it was, and to me again, my parents cared about me. They loved me. He was willing to do something like that. Now again, I would probably do things different if my child's throwing a fit. I'm not going to just give in and let them have their way that way, especially with a Metallica concert. But again, worldly upbringing is, it was the best you could expect, I suppose. It was a good, I'm very appreciative of them. And then
So what other stuff did they not let you do?
yeah, there was another example when I got a little bit older than in high school. I think I was probably around like 16, 17 years old. Spring break comes up, and again, we're in Chicago area, and a lot of my friends are going to Mexico, Cancun, to do their spring break. And of course, why do teenagers want to go to Cancun, Mexico for spring break? Because it's just full of debauchery. There's no drinking age. You can go, you get into bars, party, get drunk. That's the main draw for going to Cancun. It's not to just enjoy the sun or the weather or the beach.
It's not to go snorkeling.
No.
Yeah.
It's to go out and party.
Right.
And that's widely known. Everyone knows that. But my parents wouldn't let me do that. And for that one, they didn't give in. They said, nope, you're not allowed to go.
That's good.
And that was that. And again, now I'm thankful. Back then it was a big deal. Back then I was really upset about it. But looking back, anytime I've been prevented from getting into a lot of sin, I'm very thankful for that.
Did your parents spank you when you were growing up too?
I don't recall. I probably had been maybe when I was younger.
But you don't have a lot of.
I don't have a lot of memories of childhood, unfortunately, in general, going back too young. So definitely not when I was an older child.
Yeah, but probably when you were younger.
But probably when I was younger.
Yeah.
And I've never even had a discussion with my parents about the whole, if they spank me or how often or anything like that. Nothing I ever asked them about. But
so coming out of your high school years, you're kind of just a typical worldly teenager. Mm-hmm. You've gone through the motions at church. And there are a lot of kids that I knew in high school like that they went to church, but they were clearly going through the motions. They didn't have a personal walk with God. They didn't have their own faith in Christ. They're not saved, but they're just kind of going through the motions, but living the life of this world. They're not reading the Bible. They don't really care, right? That's kind of about what it was like?
Yep.
And then, then you rolled straight into college?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and again, that was what was expected from me. So as in my household, right? You go to school. I was a good student, or I got good grades. School came relatively easy to me. And again, in a public school, it's not like I was being challenged that hard anyways. Right, it was if you show up and just turn your assignments in,
you're gonna pass.
You're gonna be passing with B's,
Sure.
at least. Like that's kind of the way it was. And so what's the next step from high school? Well, you go to college, right, to prepare for a career. And this is all just a world mindset. So that's what I did. But for me, I wasn't thinking of advancing my education. I have two older brothers, and one of my older brothers went to the University of Illinois in Champaign. And when he went there, of course, my family went down to help him move in and things like that. And I had gone down and visited him before graduating from high school, and of course, went out to a party, lived in a house with some other guys, and they threw a party, and I thought it was great. I thought it was a lot of fun.
Like kind of college lifestyle.
College atmosphere of just.
And how far is Champaign from Burbank?
About an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. It's far. It's close enough, but it's far enough away to be on your own. It's not like my parents are going down there all the time or checking up on me.
You,
No, I was on my own, and that's what I was really looking forward to. I just want to be on my own. The whole point of wanting to be on my own was to do what I wanted to do.
Things,
not have any supervision.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I did after I graduated from high school. Went to University of Illinois, and partied it up. And other thing that made it easy for me to party it up and not be as focused on my education, my parents paid for my way through. They paid for my tuition. So
you're not going to feel the same about it as if you were paying your own way.
Right.
Yeah, you're going to take it seriously when
right.
you're paying for it.
And I also got a wake-up call at that point too with the education, because in high school it was a breeze. It was, I was not being challenged at all. So I'm used to not having to put very much effort into school in order to get good grades.
Right.
Now all of a sudden I'm going to a university.
So the standard's higher.
The standard's much higher.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's very competitive. And you have people. It was actually at the time I went for engineering, electrical engineering, and there were a lot of international students and a lot of people who, I mean, they're spending a lot of money paying out of state, living maybe even in another country, to get this
so you're
education.
Competing with the Hindus on math and engineering and stuff like that. Yeah.
And here I am, the privileged American kid,
Partying.
just partying it up and thinking that, oh yeah, I'll just deal with that later, and
So once you got to college, you're not living with your parents anymore. Are you going to church down in Champaign?
Not at all.
So that was when you quit going to church.
Well, even before that, I quit. My parents only made me go to church. I don't remember exactly when it was, at some point in high school where I didn't really want to go anymore. And they were okay with that. I mean, I would go still sometimes, but I didn't have to go every week.
Right.
And it was one of those things where, I would go on Christmas, I'd go on Easter, I'd go some other times, just kind of throughout the year.
You're kind of phasing it out, though.
Phasing it out, right. So then, of course, by the time I get to college, it's not at all. It's just non-existent. I couldn't tell you what they had for options at church down there, because
You didn't even open the phone book and take a look.
Didn't even care. But that's also, that this time now when I was at University of Illinois is also the time period when I got saved. So what ended up happening was the party lifestyle is not all it's cracked up to be. Anyone who's done it for sure knows that, and anyone who reads the Bible knows that. But I had a girlfriend, I really was close to, and we broke up. And then I started kind of questioning a lot of things. I started, after a while, everything wears on you.
So you're kind of wondering, like, where am I going in life?
Exactly.
Why am I here? What am I doing?
I'm just partying. I already start to get this sense that I'm just kind of like wasteful, vain, empty existence. And I start getting kind of depressed, right? A world called depressed. It was kind of just down. Didn't know what I was doing. I'm just like, I'm blowing my parents' money here at school, but not really caring, not even knowing what I want to do. I only chose a major because I was good at math and science, so it just was kind of a natural fit. Like, well, let's do what you're good at, So I continued into that. Didn't really like it though. Wasn't what I wanted. So I didn't know what I wanted to do, And I get to this whole point of just questioning even my own existence. It's like, why am I here? What am I doing? And that's really became kind of my soul searching moment. And I started thinking about it more, and I was saying, I had this desire. I just want to know what's right and what's true. I want to know God. I want to know who God is.
Right.
And I had this, my thought process. I remember this specifically, very vividly. But I remember thinking, I don't want to just assume that Christianity is right just because I was raised that way. You start thinking about, what about the billions of people that live in other parts of the world that are raised Hindu or raised Muslim or raised, any other religion. Just because you're raised that way doesn't make it right. So that kind of started my search. I started researching a little bit on these different religions just to learn more about them for myself, to see what makes sense. What do I think is right?
So you were seeking truth at that
I was
time.
seeking truth, and I just wanted to know what was right. And that's what I was really interested in. And I remember going to one debate that they had on campus, and it was probably like was a Campus Crusades for Christ or something, one of those organizations. I don't remember specifically who it was. Someone was putting on this event, and it was this debate between some Islam apologist and some Christian apologist or whatever, right? And they're having this discussion or debate. So I decided to go to that because, again, I was seeking. I just wanted to see, well, what are they going to say? And I just remember the Christian just kind of destroyed all of the arguments that the Muslim had. And I don't remember everything after that event. I mean, it had an impact on me, which I remember it. I know I stuck around and I talked to some people afterwards. And this is where I think I probably was given the gospel. I don't remember any specific conversations.
You were chatting with people after the debate and fellow or not fellow because you weren't saved, but
Other-
other people that were there that were Christians were kind of talking to you about the gospel. So you were hearing the gospel from people in conversation.
That's what I think happened, because I don't remember the specific conversations. But I'm kind of thinking that must have been what was going on, at least in one conversation I was having.
Because you hung out afterward.
Well, because it was shortly after that when I called on the name of the Lord, when I put my faith in Jesus Christ and I got saved in my bedroom, in my apartment. You know, it was only probably a matter of weeks after that. So I'm pretty confident that's where the seed was planted. I don't think it was from the debater. I think it was from my conversations.
But it was either the debaters preaching or the people you talked to afterward. You heard a lot of stuff.
I heard enough.
Something worked.
Something hit home, and you know, again, I hit a real low point, and that's when I decided, you know what, I can't do this. I need a savior. I need to be saved, and I called on Jesus. And what's really interesting about that, or my own personal testimony, I guess it's interesting to me. The next day, you know, that night, and I don't share this with everybody, just because I'm not the type of person who puts a lot of stock in, dreams or feelings or things like that, right? I don't really bring it up because I don't want people to think, oh, well, that didn't happen to me, so maybe I'm not saved, right? When I'm preaching the gospel to somebody. But what did happen with me, the night I got saved, I had this dream, and I remember the dream pretty vividly as well. And I don't remember dreams. Like, I couldn't tell you the last time I even had a dream. I don't know. But this one I remember specifically. And the dream was, I was kind of standing, what I call in the middle of a tornado. And there's things spinning, and there's all kinds of turmoil all around me. And I'm sitting in the eye of the storm, just like in peace and very comfortable and calm with everything circling around me. And I also remember, I don't know if it was an apparition, but just the sense that like Satan was there and he was just really angry. And that's why everything was spinning around me and in so much turmoil, is because he was angry that I got saved and that, you know, my eternity was changed. And that was a dream, right? So it is what it is. I thought it was interesting. It's not like that's what I rely on to show that I was saved.
Well, at a minimum, that's what you were thinking about.
Right. That was going on in my head, and that was, so yeah, I had that dream. And then the next day, you know, I started to tell my roommates about it. They were my friends, you know. It was a big deal. It was
like,
life-changing for me. I got saved.
Yeah.
And what's funny is I couldn't even really explain it very well. I just knew that I was saved. I knew that, like, they're like, well, what do you mean you're saved? Like, well, I believe in Jesus. Like, I couldn't articulate very well at all. And they're kind of like mocking me and making fun, like, oh yeah, whatever. You know, they'd ask me questions at first, but then they're just like, yeah, whatever, you know. And I remember then also visiting back home with my other friends I grew up with in high school. None of them ended up going off to college. So when I would go home, I'd visit with them. We'd hang out, and you know, at the time we still would drink and things like that. And we'd be hanging out, and I told them about it too. Like, hey, man, I got saved. And it was kind of a similar response, like, what are you talking about? Like, what do you mean? And this got blown off. And I would bring it up from time to time. At that point, I remember talking to my brother quite a bit, because he had gone through his own kind of experiences. You know, his background in a way is similar to mine, as far as just getting into kind of a party scene and living that type of a life. And then
getting burned out on it.
Getting burned out on that, and then finding religion for himself and finding, you know, God in his way. And he actually introduced me to some interesting material, because when I first got saved and I knew my faith was in Christ, being a science guy and someone, I was really into science and math, and I really did like that. I was taught growing up evolution was true as a fact, you know, and I knew right off the bat, like, well, there's a contradiction. Because I knew the Bible contradicted evolution.
Yeah.
You know, I knew that. And I just never really cared enough about it to look into it. But once I'm a believer, I said, you know what, I believe the Bible, and my faith is in Christ, so how does this fit in? How does this work? And he gave me some material on creationism, you know, and just explaining things even from a scientific standpoint. Like, I've just been lied to. Right. I've just totally eaten up this pack of lies. on evolution and really started questioning things. He also turned me on to the King James Bible, being the Word of God. So that helped a lot. But I never really got plugged into a church. So
Did you visit some churches or?
I did. In Burbank, I did. So because it was shortly after I got saved at University of Illinois when I quit going. I went there for 2.5 years, and then I quit. Because, again, it was still kind of an emptiness. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And I didn't want to waste my parents' money and just keep going for the sake of going.
So you quit going to college shortly after you got saved?
After I got saved, right.
Okay.
So then when I go back, move back in with my parents in Burbank, I start working at a machine shop. And at that time my brother and I, and he was more the motivator for me to go out and go to a church and like, hey, try this church with me. So I would go with him so he wouldn't go alone.
Right.
And Baptist churches, because he was
leaning
that way. So he was going that direction. I was kind of following his lead. Like I said, he turned me on to the King James Bible. So we started trying these different Baptist churches, and a couple of them were pretty good. They were decent. Nothing very memorable, but I was really having most of me in the world and just kind of going that way a little bit, but never got plugged in. Nothing ever.
Didn't get baptized.
Nope. And it was this interest that I had in telling my friends, right after I got saved, faded. Because I continued doing the things that I had done before I was saved. Right? I didn't have the moment, the Paul Washer, right? Where, as soon as I got saved, I never wanted to do anything again, right? I didn't have that. It was, it was important to me, and I was telling other people about it. But,
the flesh is still there.
The flesh is still there.
The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak.
Exactly.
And I mean, when you've just developed all these habits of life, and you're already an adult, and you've spent years and years and years living a certain way, you're not necessarily just going to turn on a dime, especially if you're not getting plugged into a good church, if you're not reading your Bible every day, you're not, walking in the Spirit.
Yeah, I wasn't getting the teaching.
You're gonna.
So for a while, I would try church here and there. There was one church I went to for a while, but it was, I don't know how to describe it, comfortable. Very comfortable in the sense of you're kind of being around people. I didn't feel like I was part of the church. I always felt like a visitor.
Like you were attending.
Like I was just attending. Yeah, they all kind of knew each other, and I didn't feel very.
You weren't on the team.
Yeah. And I would listen, but there really wasn't a lot being said. And in this part of my life, and kind of, I did go to a few different churches, and I was gone. Nothing stood out to me as being like, wow, here's someone actually preaching the truth.
Yeah.
It was just, it felt more like a checkbox of going to church because that's what you're supposed to do. I
went to church today.
Right. But, and that's not why that is part of the reason why I went, but that's not what I was looking for. I wanted to hear.
You wanted something
teaching.
real.
I wanted that. So I ended up getting kind of jaded with churches in general.
And then you just got out of church.
And I got out of church.
So you got saved, didn't get baptized, didn't really get seriously discipled or anything, tried some churches, dabbled in church, but because church wasn't what you were looking for, the churches that you went to weren't what they cracked up to be, you eventually just got sick of it and faded away. Right?
Yep. So after I quit college, I had to do something. So I started working at a machine shop. My uncle got me a job and worked there for a couple years while I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, right? Because I quit school because I just didn't know. Everything kind of seemed vain and empty. I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I started work at a good trade, got a decent job, and was just kind of kept my nose down, working for a while, still hanging out with my buddies. At this point, I was living at home. I was making, at the time, decent money, especially for not having any bills. I was saved, but nothing really changed that much then overall in my life because I didn't get plugged into a church. And then when I stopped looking for a church, I just continued doing the things I was doing, which was hanging out with my friends, going out to the bars, and just kind of living that life, just week after week. You go to work, you go out and party, and repeat, right? And you just kind of keep doing that cycle. And this whole time, I'm trying to figure out what do I want to do? Where am I going with my life? I realized after the first year and a half at the machine shop, it wasn't what I wanted to do. I didn't think it was going to keep me very interested. I get bored of it kind of quick. It was cool at first. I learned a lot of new things, but I could kind of see where the ceiling was, and I was going to hit that sooner than I would have wanted to, and get bored with the job. So I decided that no, I need a change. I need a change in many ways. I was getting sick of, and I knew at this point, I had learned enough in the Presbyterian church about the Bible, even not being saved. I just learned facts. You learn certain things. I knew it wasn't right to be going out and getting drunk. It's a pretty basic concept.
Right.
There are things I knew, like, yeah, I shouldn't be doing this. And being a believer, it bothered me more.
Even the Protestants have a limit to their drinking.
That's right. There's definitely things, just being totally inebriated, I knew that wasn't right. I knew it was a sin. And you could feel, your body gives you the feeling.
And you felt bad about it.
I felt bad about it.
You're saved, you got the Holy Spirit living inside of you, you're feeling
I was getting some conviction.
Guilty, convicted, yeah.
And I knew it was time for a change. So I also had a friend that moved out to Arizona that I was friends with in high school that I actually ended up rooming with at University of Illinois. He had this plan when I was still going to school there to go out to Arizona State for a semester. And again, he just treated it as this fun thing where you could leave the college, you don't have to reapply for admittance, you could just leave for a semester, go there, have fun in Arizona, and then go back and finish your degree in Illinois. So I was like, oh, that's a great idea. Well, he got accepted to the school and I didn't. So he ended up going and I ended up staying. But I did go out with him. And when he went out to Arizona, I fell in love with the place. I was like, he went in January.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
Yeah,
Arizona's
it was great. We went from Chicago in January to Phoenix in January.
Right, yeah.
And I thought it was funny because here I am, I'm walking around in shorts.
Yeah.
In January because, it's like in the 60s or 70s or whatever,
degrees,
right?
Yeah.
And beautiful. And I see other people that are from Arizona walking around with like jackets on. It's like, that's crazy to me. But I loved it. People seemed very friendly. It was nice, great place to be. But again, I didn't get accepted, so I stayed here. Well, he never came back after that semester either. He ended up staying, and he loved it out here. Mm-hmm. He ended up just staying at Arizona State and finishing his school there. So for the 2 years I was out of college, he was still in Arizona, and I'm getting to this point, I need a change. And I was just like, well, I loved it in Arizona. I thought it was great. And sometimes if you want to break habits, you kind of got to distance yourself,
Absolutely.
Right? So
yeah, look how many times in the Bible when people had it, they had to like move somewhere.
Right.
Abraham has to move and people have to kind of leave their father's house and whatever.
Yeah.
So basically like a change of geography can sometimes be good for a change spiritually.
Right.
Get away from the old friends.
Right.
Old influences.
That's exactly what I was trying to do.
That's pretty common. Yeah.
So that's because I was getting fed up with myself, right, with the partying, drinking, and stuff. So like,
right.
hey, I'm gonna make a change. I'm gonna go to school. I'm gonna go a different direction. Actually, go forward with a career, and try to get rid of this sin in my life.
Right.
Because it's really bringing me down.
Well, because the inward man is desiring a change.
That's right. That's right. So I decided to move, and the move was going to happen no matter what. I applied for the school. Mm-hmm. I didn't even know if I was accepted or not until I was halfway there. So I packed up and moved, not having a place to go even, except I had a friend there that I was going to be able to stay with until I could find a...
But you just wanted to get out there, whether you get into the school or not. I just wanted to get out there.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, getting into school made it easy to get housing because then you get the dormitory or whatever through the school. I didn't have to find an apartment, they'll rent to me and whatever. But I was confident I could get a job. I had enough skill and I was a hard worker at that point just to do whatever. And when you're only supporting yourself when you're young, it doesn't take much.
Right.
And so I moved out there and I really wanted to make a change, but I found it was very lonely. The only friend that I had out there was my buddy from high school that he was into partying too, right? So when you go to try to make a change spiritually or change, getting away from some things when your only connection in an area is one that's not the influence that I wanted. It didn't work. Let's put it that way. And the only way I kind of knew how to meet people was I was used to going out to a bar. So your old habits, unless you're really able to do a clean cut. I was trying to do that, but after a few weeks, didn't know anybody. I felt I was a little bit older in the dorm, being 20. I forget exactly how old I was. 21, somewhere around there. Most of the kids are like 17 or 18 coming in, and to me now it doesn't seem like it's that big of a difference, but at the time it's a big difference. Even just someone who's in high school versus someone who's 21 is kind of a bigger difference at the time. And I didn't know anybody, so I fell back into my bad habits. And within 3 weeks of being here, I ended up getting a DUI. And again, that was a wake-up call. I decided to start looking for churches at that time, but what made it difficult is that my driver's license was suspended. So I was kind of limited in where I could go. I would still drive sometimes, Hopefully I can't get convicted for this now. I think it's the statute of limitations is passed, admitting to some crime, driving on a suspended license. But, and at that time, I found a couple churches that were meeting in homes, just meeting in their houses. And they were nice, but again, I had the same experience in Arizona that I did in Illinois. When I would try different churches, they all just seemed, for lack of a better term, lame.
Yeah.
It was not a lot being said. We would read parts of the Bible, and I'd be thinking to myself, oh, cool, great, and they just skip right over it. Like here's an interesting part.
Yeah, you're seeing all this cool stuff in the Bible, and they're talking everything except the part that's cool.
Right.
They're just ruining every passage.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally remember that feeling.
Yeah.
Because I was saved as a kid in a fundamental Baptist church, but I spent my whole teenage years in these liberal churches. And you'd go to these small group Bible studies, and they'd talk for like an hour and a half about like 4 verses.
Right.
But they'd miss all the best parts
in the
verses.
context.
It's like, you're beating this into the ground.
Yeah.
You're talking about everything except the part
it's like the passage is about.
Actually, it's about.
Right.
The part's actually interesting. It's like it's like they're almost making a point to make it boring.
Right. And that was the experience I had. And so again, I had kind of gotten jaded. And, from that point forward, I lived just a worldly, sinful life. Continued on the path I was in, because again, I didn't get plugged in. I didn't get any good teaching. I ended up getting in trouble one more time, driving under the influence, which I wasn't convicted for. But at the time I got pulled over was a big change for me, because that's when I decided I'm done. I feel like God was coming down on me.
Were you being chastised?
I was being chastised for sure. It wasn't, both instances were good examples of me being chastened and disciplined as a child of God. Because with that first DUI, I glossed over that, but the ramifications of that for, with the state punishments, normally at the time, when people would get convicted of a DUI, it's like, 30 or 90 day driving suspension and like this jail time that's reduced to like a day or something. It's like it's like a standard that most people get. I got way more than that.
Yeah.
I got like 10 days in jail. I got all these fines.
Yeah.
I got my driver's license suspended here, and then I got my driver's license suspended. It's still an Illinois license.
I mean, getting a DUI is serious.
It's
expensive.
It's serious, but it was compounded probably about 5 times what other people were getting from what I got, and I felt that as definitely being chastened of God, that I was doing.
Like
I should have been doing that.
Making sure you got the max.
Right.
To punish you because you're saved.
Because I'm saved and I know better.
Yeah.
And so then this time, I was broken, and I vowed to God that I would never touch alcohol again, because I was done with it, and I've kept that vow to this day. So it was.
And how many years ago was that? Because that was how long before you came to Faithful Word was that?
Years, I would say. Maybe I'm trying to remember exactly, maybe 1 or 2 years.
So this is probably about 14 years ago then, right? Because you started coming to Faithful Word Baptist about 12 years ago.
2006.
Yeah, so that was 12 years ago, a little less than 12
So
years
about
ago.
13, 14 years ago was...
So 13, 14 years ago, and that's when you were done with alcohol.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was it. And that actually helped a lot. Just spiritually, obviously, you're not having that influence on your life because it leads to other sins. You know,
Sure,
you drink it, it just pollutes you
Absolutely.
in many ways. And you just kind of continue down this path. And I didn't even realize it until I got plugged into Faithful Word, how rotten I had gotten, how bad things were, you know. But the preaching is what I really needed. Now, that extreme example of you know, getting the ramifications of, you know, breaking the law and that was big for me to, you know, to get me to stop. But it wasn't the state. It was my relationship with God that I was trying to get right. You know,
because you knew that it was God who was allowing that stuff to happen as a punishment.
Right. So so I thank God for that, and I ended up not being convicted of that, and I think God showed mercy on me
because you had repentance.
Because I had repentance, and He saw that I was serious about it,
right.
and I really didn't, and He knew my heart, so He did end up showing mercy on me in that regard. It wasn't until now coming to Faithful Word, right? I was still jaded with the churches. Even though I was trying to get right with God on my own, I would pick out my Bible from time to time and want to read and know more and try to get right with God. But I had given up on finding a church.
So there was a year and a half or so after you quit drinking, but before you got into Faithful Word Baptist Church.
Right.
So during that period, you're not drinking,
right.
So you've cleaned up your life somewhat. And you're
still the same friends, but you know, it's not the same. I'm starting to see things different,
right?
Because I would go out with them,
yeah,
and then you just kind of see the real foolishness
sure.
when you're not participating in it.
When you're sober,
yeah. It definitely makes a difference.
Okay, so how'd you end up getting into Faithful Word Baptist Church?
So getting into Faithful Word Baptist Church, you know, my parents would come. I've been in Arizona for a while now. My parents come out and visit me, and you know, even though by this point, my relationship with my parents, they had known, like, I've adopted the independent fundamental Baptist doctrine. That's what I was. Even though I couldn't find a church that I really wanted to be a part of, they were the ones that I felt they preach the truth, they've got it right, they've got the Bible, they've got, you know, that's what I believed. Mm-hmm. My parents were still going to Reformed churches. They had left that Presbyterian church I grew up in, but continued in going to Reformed churches,
other Protestant
churches, and that was where their faith is. But my mother was wanting me to go to church, and even though we had differing beliefs, because we, you know, religion comes up from time to time, we talk about it, and they knew what I believed in different things. So my mom really knew the value of going to church and that it would be helpful in my life, and she wanted me to go to church. So she said, "Okay, you know, I want to go to church with you this Sunday," when they were visiting. And I was like, okay, yeah. You know, it's kind of blowing it off. And she said, well, I'll go to whatever church you want to go to. Okay, yeah, whatever. You know, she said, well, I'll find it. So she opens up the phone book. She finds the Faithful Word Baptist Church ad. You know, I remember, are you tired of liberal preaching? Was one of the questions you had in there. And it was independent, fundamental, soul winning, right? So this ad, she thinks, hey, that's going to be right up my alley. Mm-hmm. And she says, well, what about this church? And I look at it, because she keeps on wanting to do this.
So
and
she was actually the one who opened the phone book and found the ad and said,
she's the one that found it.
Well, this seems like something you would like.
Yes. Yes, exactly. So then I look at it, and I saw you had a website. Or I don't know if you had it in the print or not, but
yeah, I did.
I found the website either way, because I remember pulling it up. Because that actually caught my attention. I saw that, and I was like, oh. Because I hadn't seen anything like that before. You know, I thought, and you know, don't get me wrong, my church search was not exhaustive.
You weren't that diligent.
I was not that diligent. Yeah. I went to some churches and I just kind of felt like, I just kind of threw up my hands. Right. It was just like, this is it. There are other churches I could have gone to and I should have gone to, and it would have been the right thing.
You weren't looking hard enough.
I was not looking hard enough.
There are other hard preaching churches that would have been out there if you looked hard enough.
Yes. But when she showed that one to me, I was like, it actually did catch my interest. So I go online and I saw you had the sermon titles up there. And I didn't listen to any of them. I just saw the titles and I was just like, this might actually be something really good.
Because you could tell it's hard preaching just from the titles.
I could tell it just from the titles. And that is what I had been craving without even being able to identify or maybe articulate that that's what I wanted to, what I was looking for.
And this is the early days of Faith Forward Baptist Church. This is August of 2006. So we'd only been around for literally less than 9 months.
Right.
We were less than 9 months old. We're meeting in my living room.
Yep.
And you know, there was only like 6 months of preaching on the website.
And what's funny about that meeting in your house is that I saw on the website that you stated that we're meeting in the house of, you know, Pastor Stephen Anderson, and I didn't tell my parents that because I knew that probably would have weirded them out a little bit going to a house. So what I did was I agreed to my parents. Okay, yeah, we'll go to church there. So now I'm actually excited about it. Now I'm looking forward to it. And we decide to go, and as we're driving, I'm driving because I know the area and stuff, so I'm driving to church. And I just kind of nonchalantly mentioned, oh, by the way, this church meets in a house. And like the car gets silent. So we're driving to church, and you know, they don't say anything because we're already going. What are we gonna do?
Yeah.
We're not gonna change churches now.
Sure.
She wanted to go to church, so I kind of got them stuck.
Yeah.
Right? To me, it wasn't a big deal. I didn't care. I had been to church in the house before.
Yeah.
And it never bothered me, ever, because that's not what I care about.
Sure.
I was just interested in a good church, finding truth. So we show up, and another thing I think is kind of funny, if you were to give of all the sermons, even probably to this day, of all the sermons you preach, if you rank them on a scale of like dynamic or like hard preaching, we probably went to the softest sermon.
It was the mildest possible sermon.
The most mild possible sermon.
How to manage your money.
That's right. How to manage your money. That was it. It was an area that I didn't feel like I really needed a lot of teaching in.
Right.
That I knew pretty well.
Yeah.
That my parents agreed with.
Well, I remember
sermon.
your dad actually walking up to me after the service and complimenting the sermon.
Yeah.
And he added some points. He's like, you know, another thing you could have mentioned is X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
But he was
Yeah,
completely in agreement with the sermon.
It was
he
totally
added
fine.
some things to
Right.
it. Yeah, I remember that.
But I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was great, and it was still. I mean, you still, you know, raise your voice a little bit, and you know, and it had some dynamic preaching in general, even though the subject matter wasn't the most, you know,
it wasn't the truth about the Sodomites.
Right? Yeah, it wasn't anything like that, but I loved it. So that I went to church that day. You know, we didn't go to evening. I'm coming from the background. You go to church once on Sunday morning and that's it. And I love the church. I don't remember the following week. I had other plans or something else. You know, I was definitely planning on going back, but I didn't. It wasn't still the priority.
Right.
That it ended up being. And I remember you stopping by and visiting then at some point. After that,
because I remember you told me on that Sunday morning, you said, I'll definitely be back.
Right.
But then the next Sunday, you weren't there.
Right.
So then the following Saturday, I went to your house because you had filled out a visitor card.
Right.
And I remember I went to your house, you were swimming in the backyard because you used to be a big swimmer.
Yep.
And we had a real good talk in your backyard and everything. And then I think you came the next day.
I did. Yeah, I came the next Sunday. I was planning on going, but like I said, it was one of those things.
But the visit didn't hurt either.
Right.
But you were probably going to come back anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
And what's funny now, as a pastor's perspective, when you go Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, Sunday morning, you know, like
feels
all
like
these
that person's
services,
been gone a long
it feels like
time.
it's been gone a long
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
And from the other perspective, it's just like, oh, I was just there. You know,
I missed 1 week.
Like
But you missed 6 services.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
But that's when I got plugged in, and it didn't take long. And you know, kind of the rest as far as my growth and getting plugged into church.
You got baptized. You started going out soul winning right away, which is great for me because you were my first steady soul winning partner at Faith Forward Baptist Church. Because I was going soul winning mainly by myself up to that point. My wife had Amanda as a soul winning partner.
Well,
and
when I attended, it was mostly women that were the regular attendees.
I mean, when you showed up, there were pretty much 3 other people besides my family.
Yeah.
It was like my family, 3 women, you, and visitors.
Right.
And we did have visitors almost every week,
Right.
just because we were knocking a lot of doors and stuff like that. But, you know, my wife had a soul winning partner, and I would have soul winning partners that would kind of come and go.
Mm-hmm.
But you were my first like consistent soul winning partner. That was a huge blessing for me to have somebody to go with me every week. And I remember when we first started going soul winning, we were going in Tempe.
Right.
And it was so unreceptive. So I think you literally, the first like 3 times we went out soul winning for like 2 hours each or something, we had no one saved.
Right.
And I kept telling you, I'm like,
It works,
hang in
yeah.
there, like we're gonna get people saved. I'm telling you, you know. And you're like, I'm not gonna quit, you know. And then I remember, you know, then we got it. We finally started getting some people saved, even in that liberal Tempe neighborhood. But then we started going to other receptive places and getting lots of people saved and stuff. Yeah, I remember that.
So at Faithful Word Baptist Church, my growth then was tremendous. After getting plugged into a good church, you know, starting to do the soul winning, I was listening to preaching, listening to the Bible. I couldn't get enough. I was really eating it up. And at that point, I wanted to serve God, be the best church member I could possibly be. I remember I always wanted to be faithful. Whenever you needed anything, you know, if you needed someone to do anything, I wanted to be the guy to just help and do it. And I was totally fine working in the background, learning. You know, you were good at kind of prodding me along a little bit to learn new skills and develop new skills and do some preaching.
Song leading, preaching.
Song leading, yeah. All of that
soul
stuff
winning.
did not come naturally to me at all. I definitely needed the instruction, and it's not something I really wanted to do, but what I really wanted to do was to serve God. So that drove me into doing things I wasn't comfortable with, like, you know, with the soul winning. I knew I needed to do it, so I did it. Is it something I wanted to do in the flesh? No, because I was uncomfortable. I didn't want to go out and knock on people's doors. It's the same thing with preaching. It's the same thing with song leading. It's the same thing with, you know, standing up in front of a group of people made me nervous and uncomfortable. And I didn't want to do it. But because I saw, you know, and heard the preaching and saw God's word, I said, well, this is something I should do. It's something I need to do. And that's kind of what led me into even wanting to become a pastor. You know, I meet some people where they already know, like, I want to serve God, I want to be a pastor, I want to do this. That wasn't my original intent. I just wanted to be a good church member. But I think what the tipping point was for becoming a pastor was when my wife and I, after I got married, you know, we went on this road trip and we started visiting other churches while we were on vacation. And we would try to find the best church that we could possibly attend. Because, you know, when we take a vacation, we don't take a vacation from church.
Right.
We still go to church. And I love visiting other churches anyways.
Me too.
Always loved visiting, meeting people.
To this day, I love that too.
Yeah, absolutely. But one of the things that I noticed, and we started going, and it's funny because this is actually, I had a similar experience with when I first started talking at the door. So you had mentioned we were soul winning partners, you know, and you were thankful to have me because I was a consistent soul winning partner. Well, in my mind, I didn't want to do the talking because every soul is like, well, they're important and you're going to do a better job than me, you know, so I just didn't want to talk. I felt like I would screw up. I didn't feel, you know, ready enough yet, and I was going to let you do it. And because I didn't understand the concept of what's better to have more talkers, you know, so I was just like, always wanted you to do it. But it wasn't until I went with someone else, because one of the times I went back to Chicago, I went to a church there. They had a soul winning program, and they did more inviting to church. And I think that's actually the first time I decided to do the talking. Was I was emboldened by someone who wasn't doing soul winning.
Right.
They were chatting, and I was just thinking like, well, I can do a better job than this, because I'll at least try to give them the gospel, right, instead of just inviting them to church. And so I did, and that's when I overcame my fears of just doing it. And then from that point on, it was okay to start learning more and doing more talking. Well, similarly, when we're visiting these other churches, and again, you know, not to sound like proud or arrogant, I'd have the same experience of seeing things in the Bible that is not being taught and not being covered. But I felt at this point, because I had done preaching at a nursing home and gone through the preaching class stuff, I was starting to think like, well, I can do this.
So you're listening to pastors preaching to their congregations, and you're thinking like, I could do this.
Right. And I could, you know.
God could use me, you know, if he's using this guy. I could do the same thing.
But not just that. I saw the need that like they're not saying what needs to be said.
Like I want to get up.
They're leaving out, and yeah, on this passage, and I think every pastor at least probably does, and to some degree think about what you would say on particular passages or things that go through your mind. And it's not always just like, oh, well, I'll be so much better. It's just what you're thinking about. But in many of these cases, I'm just thinking like this needs to be taught,
right?
And it's just not being taught. So I saw the need firsthand of the style of church that you have, that and that other churches have. But I wasn't, I was trying to find the best church, and I wasn't seeing.
So basically, you're at Faithful Word, and you're hearing Bible preaching that kind of preaches everything in the passage,
right?
And then you're going and visiting churches in other states, and you're thinking to yourself, wow, there's a lot being left out.
Exactly.
And I want to be one of the preachers that gets up and covers everything.
Well, right. And that's when I decided, that's when it was laid on my heart, so to speak, that there is a need.
Right.
And someone needs to fill that gap. Someone needs to step up and really provide the preaching, because those are the churches, similar type churches that I was attending, and I wasn't plugged in. It wasn't until I got into a church that was preaching the whole counsel that really, God did the most work in my life, because I was hearing all this good doctrine and good teaching, and just, it made a big difference. I think if I would have gotten into a church like Faithful Word when I was, 20, when I first got saved, my whole life would have been different. I mean, there's things I wouldn't have gotten into at all, because I would have been receptive. I know I would have been receptive to hearing the truth given just unapologetically of this is what the Bible says.
Being in the right church is going to make all the difference.
Exactly.
And so basically, being in a watered down church didn't do anything for you spiritually, even after you were saved. You had a desire to do right, but these churches weren't getting you, across the finish line.
Exactly.
And so that inspired you to want to help the next young Dave Berzins, right, who's saved and wants to do right, from going to church and being disappointed.
That's right. Yeah, and that's so because I saw the need, then the desire came to, and you had already been, teaching me and training me, and I knew I had your confidence that you were feeling like I was qualified to do this. And even when I was questioning myself, am I qualified? I don't know, you had the faith in me, and I had to rely on that, of your discernment and knowledge, just that I was ready. So after 7 years of that training and soul winning and preaching and everything at Faithful Word is when Faithful Word deemed me ready to pastor. And I was fully on board and then excited about starting somewhere else. So, we chose Prescott Valley. I loved Arizona, didn't want to leave the state. And
it was kind of an experiment, because we were kind of curious what it would be like starting a church like ours in a small town.
Right.
Because obviously Faithful Word Baptist Church is in a big city. Phoenix, Arizona, 4.3 million people. And then Pastor Roger Jimenez started in a big city, Sacramento, California, 2 million people in the county, and right next to just these metropolises of San Francisco, San Jose, and everything like that. Whereas you ended up starting in a small town.
Right.
So that was, and I remember us talking about it. It was a little bit of an experiment, like, how's this going to work?
Right. And it was good, though, because we're only an hour and a half away. So I remember you saying, we'll be sending people up to help you. So we had the support of Faithful Word, and for a long time, on Wednesday evening, we'd have guys driving up from Phoenix. On Sundays, we'd have people driving up and just visiting to really help get the church started.
Knocking doors with you and going to church,
it's
playing
hard
the piano.
When people show up to church in a house and there's only like a couple, like one person there, or just my family, they're not as likely to come back. Even if they like the church, a lot of times people just kind of feel like, oh, they almost feel like it's not church.
Right.
So having that support was very helpful. Now, what we found out after 4.5 years pastoring in that area is that it's a very hard area to hit. The soul winning is very difficult. Everyone who's ever visited our church and gone out soul winning has gotten a dose of that.
Myself included.
Right. So it's a difficult area. We ran into obviously a lot of issues. Now I gave it everything I could. We knocked essentially every single door in Prescott Valley. Some areas we knocked twice. We started getting into Prescott. We started getting into Dewey, Humboldt. And every time we'd go to these areas, I'd think, oh, maybe this is going to be a little bit more receptive. But it was pretty much the same mentality.
You knocked the doors of about 50,000 people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. At least. Yeah.
Yeah. About 50,000 because there's about 100,000 in the county. And I've looked at your soul winning maps of what you've covered, and it's the doors of about 50,000 people that were knocked. And
not only did we do that, we sent out. We were doing mailers. Obviously, the soul winning leaving invitations on doors. We even had the TV commercial, right? The 30-second spot on TV, which a lot of people saw. I remember knocking on doors and people were like, hey, did I see you on TV? Like, yeah, I had that commercial. So it was reaching people. We would hold the big soul winning marathons where a lot of members from Faithful Word would come up and help us out and just knock large sections of the city. And we had a Babylon USA showing, advertised that, made a big public deal about that, ads in the newspaper. But
weren't you even advertised at the movie theater or something? There was like a movie theater little.
Yes, yeah, an insert like the free brochure you get at the movie theater.
Right.
Had an ad for Word of Truth Baptist Church. I mean, anywhere I could get in, everything I could do possibly to get the word out there that we exist. The Facebook ads, YouTube, everything. Just trying to bombard Prescott Valley in the area with just the information that we exist. So if there's any other believers out there that are kind of sick of this, but what we found is that, when I started the church, I did a little bit of research on what other independent fundamental Baptist churches existed, and I found a few. I couldn't find any information on soul winning though, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to go there. Is it's enough people in the area that definitely deserves to have a church there.
Evangelized.
And it's very needed. So, but what ended up happening, what I found out, is that two of those churches, two of the, I think 3 or 4 that existed, had closed their doors shortly after we opened our church. So it seemed to be a place, and those were like, to my knowledge, some of the best churches that were probably you could be able to find there.
It's kind of a graveyard for independent Baptist churches. Like 50% of them died during the 4 years that you were there.
And the way that I've come to view Prescott Valley is, the demographics are a little bit older. It's a very nice place to live.
Oh, yeah.
It's very conservative. It's beautiful. It's not too expensive. There's not a lot of jobs, but it's still, and the reason for that, I think, is that most of the people that populate are people who have retired. But what it seems like is that it's the retirement mentality all the way around. So it's spiritually retirement and physically retirement, that people will come there and they're just kind of want to live out their life.
They're done.
At ease, and, no more fight, no more battle. It's just kind of the way it is. And I think that's part of the reason why we have not experienced more growth at the church. And so now, that being factored in was a big consideration for the move to start doing work in another area.
Yeah, and I think it's obvious that it's time to move on for you. I think going to Atlanta, starting Stronghold Baptist Church it just makes sense. You've done the work in Prescott Valley. You've knocked every door. You preached your heart out. I've gone up there and preached, and we've had events, and it just seems like that place is just filled with a lot of people who are maybe saved, but they don't want to get on fire for the Lord. They don't want to be zealous or work hard. And, hopefully over time, and obviously that church is going to continue to exist and it is still going. Hopefully over time, we'll find some people in Prescott Valley that eventually want to get serious and get all in and work hard. But
the other struggles that I found at Word of Truth is that when we did come across people who were good church members, oftentimes they were in transition in their life. So they were not planted in Prescott Valley or even in the area for very long. So there are other things that would drive them away. And every time the church would start to grow,
People
people
away.
would be moving away.
You get a great
for
church
other
member,
reasons.
and then they move to another state.
That's right. That's right. And we'd be helping
Yeah.
people out. And there's been so many examples. I could go on and on with examples of individuals that different life events happened in their life where it actually, you could say it made sense for them to move away. And it's not that they were moving out of church. They were just moving away. They were moving on to somewhere else, and they were only in the area temporarily. So it was...
So what kind of church does the average saved person in Prescott Valley go to? Because, I know we won a lot of people to the Lord up there. And when you go soul winning in Prescott Valley, you run into a lot of people that are already saved.
Yeah, there are a lot of people who are saved.
Where are all these people going to church that are already saved? What type of church do they typically go to?
Well, for starters, there's a lot of churches in Prescott Valley.
Yeah.
There are, for like per capita, I was trying to find the numbers on it. I couldn't actually
Just
find
not
those
independent
stats,
Baptists.
but not as many. There's Southern Baptist churches, and there's some independent Baptists, and then there's these Bible churches too. So like there's a Bible church that has a lot of people, but the biggest church I think is it's called the Heights. And I think it's just the biggest church that they have. And I know there's a lot of people who are saved that attend that church.
It's just kind of a big fun center.
But that's exactly right. Yeah. It's just one of those big, I don't know if they'd call it a mega church, but it's definitely the biggest one in the area. And they have the programs for the kids. They have, all the stuff going on that is attractive to people who just kind of want to go. And
so that's where your typical believer in Prescott Valley is going. They're going to the Bible church. They're going to the non-denom church. Right. They're going to a Southern Baptist church and just kind of coasting spiritually.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, how many people were we able to win to the Lord between Word of Truth Baptist Church and the different soul winning events that were put on? How many salvations did Word of Truth rack up? And obviously, we won't know till we get to heaven, but how many did we count as far as calling upon?
We were averaging 120 a year, every single year. So 4.5 years, we're looking at just over 500.
So over 500 people. So that's great.
It's great. Praise God.
At least that's approximately 500 people that aren't going to hell.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. The work was still being done.
Yeah.
It was harder, but we were still reaching people. We're still getting people saved. Still getting people baptized. We had people from the area coming to church for just a lot of sometimes they just didn't
just
stick
a
with
revolving
it.
door.
It's a revolving door, exactly. Yeah. So that's my mentality then for moving on. One of the things that really helped out a lot was with you, because I'm not the type of person, even if we had only 2 people coming to church, I'd feel like I'd turn my back on them if I had to close the doors.
Yeah, and you had more than that. But even
we had more than that.
If you only had a couple,
Even if it was just a couple other people besides my family, I wouldn't want to do it. But I'm very thankful that we started the church not too far from you, because when I talked to you about it, you said that you'd be able to keep the doors open.
Yeah, we'll keep operating the church, keep it rolling, so that you can go
while I'm able to work somewhere else. And the way that I see things is I don't look at Word of Truth Baptist Church as a failure. I don't. We had over 500 people saved.
Amen.
There's a lot of work still being done up there. I think the ground just needs to be plowed some more. I think there's a lot of hope for the area just because there's a lot of people who are saved. I think it's going to take a while to get through to them. But I also look at it this way, is on this great field of the earth, where God has laborers, and, even in Jesus' day, he's saying, pray that God's going to send forth more laborers, because the laborers are few.
Yeah.
When you have an area that's really ripe for a harvest, in another area where it's just hard ground and it's not doing so well, I think that it's going to be that God's going to want, hey, why don't you go over here and just get
common
this
sense
great
missions.
area. Exactly.
Common sense to go to the receptive areas and focus there, and not to beat your head against the wall over here when you can go somewhere else where people are dying for a church like yours. In Prescott Valley, they don't want it. They're lukewarm.
Right.
So if there's another part of the country where people are dying for your kind of preaching, for your kind of church, and they're looking for that leadership, it just makes more sense to go where people want the message.
That's right.
And shake the dust off your feet. And it, we're still gonna keep evangelizing Prescott Valley, but I think Prescott Valley is more of a mission as far as it's just about getting everybody the gospel.
Right.
But at this point, there aren't enough people up there that really want to get serious about being in the Lord's army.
That's right.
And you need to be a general in the Lord's army, and so I think it just makes perfect sense to go somewhere else at this point. So I think God's got great things for you in Atlanta. So what are your goals as far as what is it that drives you right now? You're starting this church, Stronghold Baptist Church in Atlanta. What do you hope to accomplish? What do you want to see happen?
So now in Atlanta, we got Stronghold Baptist Church, and there's a great group of people out there that are just on fire for serving God. And my goal is to just really get the most people saved that we can, and to get the most people trained within church that actually love God, that are serious about serving God, and to start more churches. Right? I want Stronghold Baptist Church to be very fruitful, to be able to produce more. I look at the churches like Steadfast and Verity and Faithful Word, and they're doing great things for God. And I don't see any reason why Stronghold Baptist Church can't be the same thing. And actually, I think it's going to be the same thing in a very short period of time, because there are a lot of people there that have a desire to serve God. Even when my very first visit to the Atlanta area, just to scope out things, there was kind of this impromptu dinner, and there was like 28 people in attendance, just kind of spur of the moment. Hey, do you guys want to meet up for dinner on Friday?
And they're fired up.
And they're fired up. People drove from all over just to sit down and eat and just kind of get together.
So you're doing way more because you don't have to start from scratch.
Right.
You've already got a team that's ready to roll.
They're ready to go.
And you're ready to lead them.
And I've had so many ideas over the years that I still want to get done. There's things that in many areas that I want to accomplish that I think are going to be great for the service of the Lord, but you can't do everything by yourself.
Right.
You can't. There's just not enough time. So with the willing people, now I'll be able to delegate and actually get things done with other like-minded believers that all want to serve the Lord in their capacity and work on a much larger scale. That's the goal there. And I know that area is ripe. And we're gonna have great success there.
Well, this has been really interesting. We could talk for hours, but this is great stuff. It's great, I think, for people to get to know you better. And, I know I learned a lot about you even in this conversation, and we've been friends for years. So, well, thanks so much for being here. It was great talking to you. And keep us posted on Stronghold Baptist.
Will do. Amen.